everyone, I'm your host Jordan Banderas, and this is the Bad Influence Podcast. But before we get started, don't forget to smash the subscribe or follow button so you don't miss out on any episodes. And let's get started. So, this past weekend, my sister-in-law had to work graveyard shift, and my wife and I agreed to watch our nephew. Now, here's the thing. He's 12, so he's a preteen. He's 12 going on 25. He's at that stage in his life where he thinks he knows everything. He has always something to say about anything. And pretty much he just wants to be heard. So I want to talk about this because my nephew, who is 12, taught me a lot about teenagers and how to deal with them. Even though me and my wife don't have kids right now, I feel like I had to learn this because at one point my wife and I may want to adopt or foster care. So at one point in our lives, we may have to deal with a teenager. And this experience, like I said, taught me a lot. So the first thing that he actually taught me was how to be patient with a younger generation that just wants to be heard. Because dealing with my nephew for 2 days, that's one of the things that I noticed. He just wanted to be heard. And the way that he wanted to be heard pretty much was by just talking about anything, having an opinion about anything. When he came to our house, which is the first time that he saw our new house, he talked about anything. He saw the TV, he saw, oh, that's a big TV. Or he will have an opinion about my cars, about my dogs, about my yard, about the windows, about anything. And I mean anything. It was driving me fucking crazy because he wouldn't shut up. I was like, I don't understand or I don't know how parents deal with their teenagers when they go through this particular stage in their lives. And I was even like, was I ever like that? And yes, I was. I was like that, and probably much worse because I never shut up until I decided to shut up because people will never listen. So because of that, I started to pay more attention to my nephew because I could tell that he wanted to be part of our conversation between me and my wife. Like, me and my wife were talking about, I don't know, like how to pay bills or something like that. And he will always try to say something about how to pay the bills, even though he doesn't pay any bills and probably he doesn't have any fucking experience about how to pay a bill, you know? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to pay attention to him because obviously he wants to be heard. He wants to be part of this conversation. And when I realized that, I asked him, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be the person that listens to him. So I was like, you know what? How was your day? So I asked him that. And one of the things that he did when I asked him this question, which I almost regret because he told me how his whole month was. Not just his day, his whole month. And he talked about it for like an hour and a half, which I was fine with it, but I was like, damn, nobody listens to you, kid. So I was like, I'm not gonna do the same thing that the grown-ups in my life did to me, where they wouldn't listen, they wouldn't ask questions like that. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to this kid. He's only 12. I don't want him to go through the same shit that I went through. So I listened to him for an hour and a half, and he finally stopped talking after he was done. I was like, finally, some peace and quiet. Now I can understand why some parents don't like to talk to their kids, because sometimes they just go off on this like long ass stories, and parents don't have a lot of patience. Let's be honest, they have to deal with work, they have to deal with, you know, the house and all this shit. But in my opinion, after dealing with my nephew, I think we always have to make time to talk to our kids and listen to them, which is more important. But anyway, so after my nephew finally was able to stopped talking because I listened to him for an hour and a half, I was like, you know what? Now I can do my own stuff in my house. So I started cleaning my fish tank. And when he saw that, he was all like, do you know what you're doing? And I'm like, yes, I do know what I'm doing. So he started questioning me again. I was like, oh my gosh, I just had like 5 minutes of quiet, and now he started again. But now, this time, he was coming off as a smartass, almost like Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory. Because he's pretty smart. He can build anything with paper, like he has built swords from paper and wood and anything. He's very smart, but he just doesn't have the social skills. So he comes off as very rude, almost like a smartass. Like I said, almost like Sheldon. So he was doing that to me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was driving me crazy. But I was like, you know what? This is just a phase. This is just a phase. Just calm down. This is teaching you something. I had to control myself because it can get pretty annoying. So like I said, I understand parents at this point. Even though it was only 2 days, I can understand why parents don't want to talk to their kids sometimes. Because one of the things that my nephew kept saying is like, oh, do you know what you're doing? I'm like, do you know what you're doing? I was like, you know what? I'm going to teach you something in life. So I was like, do you know what you're doing? Or do you know how to do it? And he's like, no, I never clean a fish tank. And I'm like, okay, so if you have never cleaned a fish tank, why do you act like you already know? And he's like, oh, I can just find the answer on Google. I'm like, okay, well, then Google it. While I was doing my cleaning, I started cleaning it. He's looking at me how I was doing it while he's Googling it. And it turns out that I was doing it the same way that Google was telling him. So he's like, oh, you know what you're doing? I'm like, I know what I'm doing because I have done it multiple times. I was like, dude, this kid is very smart ass. He comes off as a very smart ass. Sometimes even as rude because he just kept like asking me questions like that, like, you know what you're doing? Oh, I know this is the right way, like things like that. So I was like, okay, because his name is Jackson. I was like, okay, Jackson, one day you're gonna piss off somebody bigger than you, stronger than you, and that person is going to beat you up because you come off as rude. You come off as very condescending to the other person, even to me, even though I know you for a while, for the last 8 years. You come off as condescending. He's like, oh no, that's not how I mean it. It's just that I want to give my opinion. And I'm like, I totally understand what you're trying to do. You just want to be part of the process or whatever. He's like, yes, I do. And I'm like, okay, but there's a way to do it as well. If you don't know how to do one thing and you see somebody else do it, don't tell them how to do it because you don't know exactly how it needs to be done. And he's like, well, you have a point, uncle. You have a point. I'm like, no, I'm telling you this because there's gonna be a point, and I had to tell him, like, I was a bully at one point. There's gonna be a point that you're gonna piss off the wrong person, and that person is gonna beat the shit out of you. I know that because I have done it. And he was like, oh no, then I don't wanna do that. Because unfortunately this kid, he doesn't know how to fight or anything like that. He's very sweet, let's just say it like that. He's very sweet. He's not a fighter. He's not like me. He's not a fighter. And he finally realized what I was telling him. He kind of understood what I was telling him, and he stopped acting all smartassy, like he finally stopped. And I was like, okay, good. Now he knows that he's in the fucking wrong, and that he can actually piss off the wrong person, like myself. I wanted to tear him a new one. Because he kept pushing my buns. I wanted to tear him a new one, but I was like, you know what? I'm gonna show him what he's doing wrong. And by doing this, another thing that he taught me is that that teenagers or preteens or at any age, I have seen the videos on TikTok and social media, they want to be treated like an adult. They want to be talked like if they're an adult. And that's one of the things that I have learned from psychologists like Gabor Mate and Dr. Shefali. They focus a lot on kids trauma and all of that. So one of the things that I have that they always say is like, you need to talk to your kid as a young adult, as a little person, because that's what they are. They're little, they don't know what they're doing. You have to guide them. And unfortunately, my nephew is in that type of situation where nobody's guiding him. So I was like, well, I'm gonna give him some little guidance. So when I started talking to him as an adult, he was more responsive and less of a smartass when it came to how he was interacting at that point. So that's one of the things that he taught me. I was like, wow, by me talking to him like an adult, like he's like the same as me, he's being nicer. He's not interrupting me. He's not doing all this shit that he was doing before that was driving me nuts. And another thing that I learned is that teenagers or kids in general, like I said, I have seen the videos on social media, they just want to be acknowledged. They just want to be known that they're there. They want to know that the parents or the adults in their life know that they're there and that they want to talk. Because a lot of teens, and I see this with my own story, the way that I was raised and everything, we just shut off. Like, we don't want to say anything because nobody listens, and then we get the information from either the internet, our friends, the streets, like we get the wrong information from multiple sources. And that's not something that we should let our kids do, because we, either as uncles, parents, or guardians, or whatever, if you're dealing with a teenager or a kid, it doesn't matter what the age is, I think we should guide them in life. At least we should teach them what life is all about. We need to show them what life is all about, because like I said, they're gonna learn it from somewhere. Just because you think your kid is inside the house, that doesn't mean that they're not looking at something on their phone that they shouldn't be looking at, like porn. You have Instagram, you can find a lot of stuff that kids shouldn't be seeing on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. There's so much shit. And from my perspective, for what I have seen with friends that have kids and everything, they don't pay attention to that. They think that their kid is not going to do bad things because they're in the house. But I'm like, dude, I did so many bad things while I was in the house with my mom. My mom was in the living room and I was in my room doing other stuff that I shouldn't be doing, like, drug dealing, doing all these things. I had the money stashed on my house, which under my bed, which is something that I talked about in another episode. So that's what I see from dealing with my nephew, and it has taught me a lot, to be honest, because now with my wife and I decide to have a kid, and obviously even if it's younger than a teen, at one point that kid is gonna grow into a teenager. So I'm gonna have to deal with a fucking teenager, and this is teaching me a lot on how to deal with the teenagers. And I'm gonna pretty much follow the information that I just gave you. Is like listening to them, talking to them as if they're a young adult, as if they're part of the household, even though they may not pay bills or anything like that. They're still part of the household because they will live with you, and in my case, with me. If we adopt or foster care. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share with you guys today on this episode, because right now we're in a weird time where kids, teenagers, they can find anything online with their friends or anything. So after dealing with my nephew, I think that we need to pay more attention to them, listen to them, because there's only a small gap where you can only listen to them before they stop, well, before they start showing off. And once they decide to not talk to you, it's hard to gain that trust again. Like, earn that trust from a very young age. So when you have a teen in your house, they know that they can talk to you about anything. Have an open door policy in your house. That way, if they see somebody doing drugs or somebody offer them drugs, which is something that I have seen with some of my friends, their teen can be like, "Hey, mom, or hey, dad, I saw this. Somebody offered me weed. Somebody offered me heroin. Somebody offered me ecstasy. Like, I don't know what to do." And then you can tell them, like, "Hey, that's bad for you because of this." Instead of having a friend telling them, "Oh, you should try it because it will feel good." You know what I mean? So that's pretty much it for today's episode. Thank you for the growth that we have achieved with the podcast. Thank you for your shares, your likes, your everything, your time. And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. We are on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you want to email me a question or anything you would like to email me, you can email me at bjordanthebadinfluence@gmail.com, or you can DM me on social media. And I'll leave you with my final thoughts. If you're a parent, you must have an open door policy with your kid, because if you don't listen, somebody else will, and they might be feeding them bullshit. And I'll leave you with that. And also, have a great day.